Hello, and welcome to our community conversation series between Safe Harbor of Sheboygan County and the City of Sheboygan Police Department. My name is Patrick, and my role with Safe Harbor is in prevention education. Our goals with this series are focused on creating a greater understanding about community agencies that victim survivors of sexual assault may first report to, along with gaining clarity regarding the roles of those agencies, the mechanisms of their support, and the resources available through those agencies. This series is also focused on creating more awareness surrounding the options available to victims and survivors so they are able to make a more informed decision about how they wish to navigate community resources. Today I'm joined by Brandon with the City of Sheboygan Police Department. Brandon, welcome, and could you begin with by introducing yourself and speaking to what role and responsibilities you have as a detective with the City of Sheboygan Police Department?
Absolutely. My name is Brandon Kehoe. I'm a detective for the Sheboygan Police Department. I'm a general assignment detective. However, I do a lot of the work with human trafficking in our community. I also work with social services on a very regular basis, providing services to our at-risk youth who are most susceptible to human trafficking victimization. And they're also involved with the age group that we're here to talk about today. And then 75% of my regular caseload pertains to sexual assault investigations. So I have considerable amount of experience in this type of work that we're talking about today. And I often work with various community stakeholders who are involved with victims of sexual assault investigations.
Perfect, thank you. So a couple of questions for you then, as we're kind of having our conversation for today. In thinking about marginalized populations and knowing that they are likely to have a higher victimization rate, along with a lower reporting rate, how does the City of Sheboygan Police Department approach working with victims, survivors of marginalized populations who may not be as trusting of law enforcement agencies?
One part of it begins with our department as a whole, where we're trying to engage with the community and develop as much public trust as possible. And I think that makes it a little bit easier for us when we do have somebody who may be a little bit distrustful of law enforcement when they look at the work we're doing as a whole, kind of, gapping that bridge is a little bit easier. The big thing is really approaching these type of situations from a non-judgmental, victim-centered approach, and letting people know that we just want to help and provide them safety and services. And those are the messages that we generally try to convey to every victim. But I think it's more paramount when you have somebody that's just distrustful that we're in a position to really help them.
Sure, yeah, thank you. When someone reports a sexual assault, what does that process look like?
Some of that is going to be dependent upon how the victim reports and the timeline, whether it's something that just occurred or something that is more historic. Generally, the most important aspect of that is going to be, having an interview with the victim, involving an advocate from your organization as quickly as possible to make sure they're supported as a victim, and just fact gathering, trying to figure out what exactly happened, when it happened, where it happened. And the format of that generally is kind of an open-ended style questioning, and that may lead to more specific questioning as we're trying to get more details about what actually happened.
Sure, thank you. So what are some of those elements of the law enforcement process that a victim survivor of sexual assault may experience?
So when we have contact with a victim, the first thing that we have to assess is what type of physical or other evidence exists. So if it's something that happened recently, we're going to try to involve our partners in the medical community as quickly as possible to support the evidence gathering process. Another component that's really important that a lot of people don't think about is digital evidence. If there's something on a cell phone, text messages, photographs, or videos that might corroborate exactly what happened, those are things that we need to be able to get our hands on really quickly because they really shed a good light onto what happened. But we're going to involve an advocate as soon as possible to make sure the victim is supported and to make sure that they know that we're not there to judge them, we want to help them, and really what amount of information they provide to law enforcement is really up to them. The more information we get at the beginning, it's more helpful to our investigation, but the victim has control over that. And I've had cases where a victim wasn't ready to report what happened, but clearly something took place. Well, then our goal is to make sure that they're safe and that they're aware of what services are available to them in our community.
Excellent, thank you. How might a victim survivor report if the assault happened in the distant past versus maybe more recently?
So what can happen is if you have something that's maybe happened a couple of years ago, physical evidence isn't going to be as paramount. However, obtaining facts of the incident is. So reporting that to law enforcement, and what may happen is as a patrol officer may respond and make contact with the victim, take the initial statement, provide resources and services to that victim, and then because it's a more complex investigation because it happened in the past, it's likely going to get assigned to a detective who would follow up with the victim and then take over the case and begin obtaining the facts about what happened in the past.
Yeah, and when you say, so just kind of a follow-up to that question, maybe, when you say like provide resources, what does that kind of look like?
Well, the main thing is how has this impacted the victim? We lean on your organization quite a bit to kind of be the clearinghouse for providing victims the services that they need. But if this event has provided trauma that's impacted them with like AODA issues, there's
Sure.
certainly a lot of various services in our community that we can point them in the direction of. If their family is having issues from the fallout of this, we can provide them, information about what to do, or really just an education on how trauma impacts a victim, so they have an understanding of maybe what their close one might be going through.
Sure, thank you. So what does an interview process look like for a victim survivor of sexual assault versus maybe the interview process for a witness of sexual assault?
The one thing that we're mindful of is that the event obviously has caused some level of trauma with the victim, and our questioning needs to be kind of curtailed to be understanding of that. So really our questioning is going to be slow, open-ended, and then eventually it's going to get to the point where there's going to be some specific questions to get more details about what took place. One practice that I try to implement is being transparent with the victim. At some point I'm going to have to ask questions that may make you feel uncomfortable. At any point you need a break, or if you're just not ready to talk about it, let me know, and we can move on. But making sure that the victim knows that we're there to hear their story and not judge them or make them feel embarrassed, that we're there to support them.
Yeah, thank you. If a victim survivor didn't want to meet at the City of Sheboygan Police Department station, for example, where else could they meet with you or other members of law enforcement to make a report if they were ready and wanting to make a report?
Thankfully, there's a lot of options. They could go to Safe Harbor.
Mhm.
I've conducted a lot of victim interviews at your facility, which have been really, really beneficial to just kind of get the services centered around the victim. They can go to a trusted friend's house. They could go to the hospital, place of employment. I mean, we can really meet somebody wherever they wish if they're willing to report something that they've been a victim of.
And what does that process maybe look like for an investigating officer to perhaps file charges?
So the first process is obviously obtaining as much information from the victim and then any potential witnesses as soon as possible. If there's any type of evidence that is more timely that we have access to, and I would consider digital evidence to be that, if there's text messages or other
Mhm.
things that corroborate that, we're going to be building, basically it's like putting a puzzle together, getting as many pieces as we can before we move on with conducting an interview with the suspect, because we got to provide them their legal opportunity to provide a statement if they so wish. If the offender is taken into custody and arrested, there's a couple options depending upon the charge. They may get issued criminal charges that are misdemeanor based that they might get released on, or if there's felony based, they'll likely go to jail and have a follow-up court date in the near future.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. And thinking back a little bit too, so when a victim survivor reports a sexual assault, does an arrest occur immediately after their statement is taken, or what does that process kind of look like?
One of the problems in our society is television has provided some misconceptions on police practice and how this process works. These are at times very complex investigations, and because a victim provided a statement doesn't mean automatically that the offender is going to be arrested right away. We need time to build a case and put the facts together and make sure that we're supporting everyone's legal rights and providing the best practice of the investigation. So what a victim shouldn't expect is just because they're providing a statement that automatically handcuffs are going on within an hour. Sometimes that happens, but it's situation dependent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. So during the course of an investigation, a victim survivor may have questions. What does this communication between you and a victim survivor of sexual assault typically look like? Or how does that communication best occur?
Generally, what I'm going to try to do is conduct follow-up with the victim as soon as possible afterward, just to make sure that they're doing okay. We're often not aware of what services they're getting for confidential reasons, but we want to ensure that they're doing okay mental health wise, to make sure they're reminded of the resources. Some of it's going to depend upon if they're living with the offender or the offender's family. It might not be best to just pop in at the house to see how they're doing if there's risk of further complications for the victim's quality of life. But I try to maintain regular contact with the victim to make sure they're updated on the status of the case. If an offender is arrested, one nice resource that's available is what's called VineLink, where a victim can be notified of incarceration changes with offender. So if they're released or if there's some type of change, they can receive an email or a text message from the app. And that's something I encourage every victim to have, because you get the good peace of mind knowing that the offender is still incarcerated, and it helps their measure of safety.
Yeah, and kind of thinking about VineLink a little bit, what can you kind of give a little bit more detail of sort of like what that is, how that works, like what that is and how that works? I think would be really kind of great.
So it's a program, it's a software that our county uses, and that really it's statewide, where if an offender is arrested, and it doesn't have to be necessarily a sexual assault, it's anyone that's been incarcerated on a crime, and you can sign up, you find the person's name in their database, you can get updates, like I said, either text message or via email if there's a change. So if they post bond, you're going to immediately get a notification that the offender has posted bond and they've been released. And I think that really helps provide victims with just that peace of mind that the person's still in jail. Because if somebody gets released at 2 o'clock in the morning, there might not be the resources to make sure that a phone call is made. Hey, so-and-so got released from jail. This way, VineLink, it's timely, it's quick, and it goes right to your device or your email account. And I think that's really a good tool to help empower victims to make sure that they focus on their own safety.
Agreed. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for explaining, to unpacking that a little bit in more detail. So thinking back to the communication then, are victim survivors able to contact you directly?
Yeah, so all of our detectives of the Sheboygan Police Department have their own office line. I also have a work Facebook page that I use, just because I know a lot of people prefer Facebook Messenger, and that's not universal with all of our investigators, but I've become aware that a lot of people just don't necessarily have a working phone. They may only have a device that uses Wi-Fi where they communicate with the outside world with Facebook Messenger. So that's another, option that I use. But I have regular contact with victims on my office line. We usually provide a business card that has all of our contact information on there. The Sheboygan Police Department website has all of our direct email addresses and office numbers on there as well. So if you need to get a hold of an investigator from the police department, it's generally pretty easy. Patrol officers, you might have to leave a message at the dispatch center to be, called depending upon what shift the officer's working. But our investigators work Monday through Friday during the day. So generally it's pretty easy to get a hold of us if you need to.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. So the final question that I have for you today is, in recognizing that victims and survivors of sexual assault have experienced a high degree of trauma. And you mentioned trauma in some of your other responses. And in thinking about that experiencing a traumatic event, what does trauma-informed care or a trauma-informed approach mean to you in your work?
Well, it's recognizing that the event has impacted someone to the point where their brain is processing what happened to them differently. So for instance, when you go through a traumatic event, your brain is going to take small little pictures of the event, and between those pictures there's going to be a gap, and as time goes on you're going to have a better picture about what happened. So for instance, if we interview somebody about something that happened 4 hours prior, they might not have as much information about the event as they might 3 days in the future. So that's something to be mindful that it's common that when a police officer interviews somebody about a significant event, they might not remember everything right away. It might take a couple different interviews. It might take 3 or 4 days to get the full picture about what happened. And it's not that the victim is lying or trying to hide information. It's just a reaction physiologically of how the human brain is impacted by a traumatic event. And obviously a sexual assault is one of the premier, traumatic events. And that's something that we have done a really good job, Sheboygan County wide, of training law enforcement to be aware of that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for kind of unpacking that a little bit and creating that understanding. I think that that's a really important awareness piece to really kind of educate our community about. Those are all the questions that I really have for you today. Unless there's anything else that you really wanted to kind of share or kind of speak to.
I think the one thing that's really important is trust that the police really want to help and make a difference. There's misconceptions of police in society right now, and I can assure you that we really want to support somebody that's in that position. That's a really dark time in somebody's life, and we want to provide the best service possible. So please trust that not only the police, but the other stakeholders that are going to be involved in the process are going to do the best job that we possibly can, and that we all go through a significant amount of professional training to make sure that we're providing the best service to the community. And I just hope that people understand and trust that we're going to do the best job that we can, and just give us the time to give us the information, and we'll do the best job we can.
Perfect. Thank you. And thank you again, Brandon, in having this conversation with me today. It's always a joy working with you, and it's always it's always a pleasure. And thank you to our audience. Please join us in the future for conversations surrounding our continued Sexual Assault Awareness Month Community Conversation Series.